It's that time again, folks. A new update for Project Zomboid's unstable branch of Build 42 has arrived. This update was posted on the 25th of September 2025 and has some fairly big new additions and changes in this one, especially if you're a fan of using Firearms to clear zombie hordes or want to see some quality of life changes to the crafting and right-click menus, something I've been quite vocal about in recent weeks. As always, I'll cover everything you need to know about this patch, cutting out all the bits you probably won't notice and focusing on the really good stuff. There's a link in the description to the full patch notes if you'd like to give them a read. And just one last thing, if you find yourself watching these updates often, maybe think about hitting the subscribe button. A huge percentage of my viewers on these very videos aren't subscribed, and it's a massive help to the channel. Okay, so yeah, that's it for the intro. Let's jump into the new additions from this update. A couple of big updates for Firearms in this patch. Firstly, ranged weapons will now use specific damage modifiers for different parts of the body, bringing it in line with how melee damage functions currently. For example, a headshot will do triple damage, shots to the legs and arms will do significantly less damage. There's also been a huge fix to shotgun targeting. Apparently, it turns out that zombies were previously dodging some of the damage coming their way unintentionally. When firing at a body part, any other pellets that were supposed to hit the non-targeted part of the body were mysteriously disappearing. This has now been fixed, and we should find shotguns feel a lot better after this patch as a result. Fingers crossed on this, because I must admit I've stayed well clear of Firearms since Build 42 for the most part, and I'd love to see them make a comeback. Shotguns are definitely an integral part of that, previously being a weapon even low-level aiming skill characters could use and benefit from. Now, if you weren't a fan of the view cone update in Build 42, or you specifically felt that the cone itself is either too strong on the eye or by contrast isn't clear enough, there is now an opacity slider for this that has been added to the performance settings so you can customize it to your liking. On a similar note, the vision cone will now make better use of exterior lighting to ensure the player can benefit from street lights and other light sources during dawn, dusk, or nighttime gameplay. The crafting menu continues to see some minor improvements to help with filtering through the myriad of crafts available, with a new option to sort by name in alphabetical order. You can also now right-click items in your inventory and see which building recipes that item can be used for, handy for those looking to build crafting benches or their own safe house from scratch. Lastly, when no recipes are available in a filtered tab, the crafting menu will now tell you that in text form. We've also seen some really positive additions in the inventory and right-click menus, stuff that we've been asking for since the release of Build 42, in fact. You will now no longer have to right-click on a can of drink and open it before then having to right-click on it again just to drink it. These two actions are now combined in a single open and drink option on the right-click menu. The same option is available for canned food items, now having the option to open and eat if the proper tools required are available to the player. On a similar token, cigarettes can now be smoked directly from the pack and do not need to be removed beforehand. These may seem like simple changes, but it shows that the developers are listening when it comes to the feedback much of the community has given them in regards to adding extra clicks to actions nobody really asked for. A definite step in the right direction. The developers didn't stop with these changes though. You can now simply double click on drinks, pills, or pretty much any other consumable item that won't poison you to consume them immediately without use of the right-click menu. If something needs to be opened, it will automatically take place after a double click, then proceed to be consumed as intended. This doesn't apply to things that are visibly tainted or poisoned, since an accidental double click could quickly mean the death of your character. Now, this next one is a big one that I know a lot of players already run mods for, and I'm really glad the devs have added this as a vanilla quality of life feature. No longer will you have to work out which VHS tapes or CDs you've already watched or listened to. There will now be a handy icon as part of the inventory UI that lets you know when you've consumed the contents of these items. As such, you won't be accidentally picking up duplicates when looting those VHS stores for skill tapes. Those of you that like to partake in farming or fishing will want to know about this new addition to composter mechanics. mechanics. If you didn't know already, worms in a composter will reproduce and thus give you more bait to use when fishing. The exception was during winter when they would not reproduce. Now, if a composter is indoors, worms will continue to reproduce even in the winter months, providing you with a good stock of fishing bait and increasing the chances of survival for forward-thinking players. On the cooking side of things, low-level skill books can now be found as surface-level items in kitchen areas. On top of that, those with level 5 cooking skill or higher will now be able to see how long it takes to cook an item before starting. I actually think this should be a lower level benefit, maybe level 2 or 3 at most, because ultimately I'm no chef and I have a reasonable idea of how long it will take to roast something, especially if I've done it once or twice already. Lastly, baking pans can now hold fluids, like many other pots and pans, so can be used to collect rainwater in a pinch. A new trait has been added to the character selection screen in this update, known as Crafty. It provides a 30% XP bonus, but only to crafting skills, and is exclusive with the fast and slow learner traits. This new trait costs a total of 3 points. A good option for players that are hoping to get into things like blacksmithing, carving, or knapping, but don't necessarily want to set aside all the points for fast learner. Time will tell if it sees some use or just falls by the wayside as a mostly unchosen trait due to alternative picks being more popular. New survivor names have also been added to the randomized selection on the character screen as well, for a bit more variety. Now, I don't think this next one is going to see much use just yet, but it will be a big help for when multiplayer rolls around. When interacting with a vehicle, previously there were limited options when it came to locking the doors and trunk. Now, players will be able to both close and lock the trunk itself by using these new buttons at the bottom of the inventory panel. And lastly, before we get into balancing changes for this update, there's been a raft of new sound effects and new animations, such as a new animation for dragging a corpse from a container, and new sound effects for various crafting benches, shelving units, megaphone usage for multiple voice lines, and sounds for filling several containers with fluid. Perhaps most importantly though, for player feedback, a pain sound is now played when your character cuts themselves on a tree branch, giving you a bit more of an indication that you might be about to bleed to death from a neck wound if you don't act quickly. Okay, so onto all things balancing next, starting with one very simple change to vehicular manslaughter. If you kill zombies by running them over with your car, this will now be appropriately added to the zombie kill count like every other kill method in game. Previously, these weren't being counted. The next one is a much larger change, and one I think most players are going to be very happy to hear about. Rebalancing of metabolic multipliers for calorie consumption on timed actions has occurred in this update. And if that was a bit of a mouthful for you, it essentially just means that previously some timed actions were using more calories than they should have. Stuff like crafting or putting up barricades, for example. These values should now be much more user-friendly and result in less calorie usage for common actions, meaning maybe, just maybe, we don't need to eat an entire gigamart's worth of food in a couple of days to stop our characters from losing weight. A very, very positive change for sure, and I'd be interested to hear from you guys if this has actually had the desired effect, so let me know down in the comments if you've noticed any difference so far. Okay, back to some crafting stuff next. The drying rack can now support multiple items at once rather than requiring single items be input at a time. While I'm sure not many players are making use of this workbench regularly right now, believe me, this is going to be a very welcome change should the drying racks eventually become commonplace, because it was painstakingly slow to handle large operations on these workbenches previously. Non-weapon items will now display their sharpness even when disconnected from a usable weapon, making it much easier to ascertain sharpness at a glance before attaching them to a handle. A welcome change for anyone that likes to craft their own makeshift weaponry. Somewhat relevant to this as well, and a minor update, more surfaces have been changed to work as crafting surfaces. No examples are given here in the patch notes, so you'll just have to get out there and find them for yourself. There have been a couple of changes to when certain recipes or knowledge is learned. Firstly, if you reach level 10 farming, you'll also learn the growing seasons of any plants you've not yet learned through magazines or seed packets. In the realm of mechanics, reaching level 8, 9, and 10 will grant knowledge of basic, intermediate, and advanced mechanics recipes respectively if they are not already known by this stage. Everything presented as metalworking has now been shifted to instead refer to this skill as blacksmithing, which should help to differentiate it from the welding skill and certainly make a lot more sense in that context. The amount of fluid needed for cleaning blood and graffiti has been lowered, meaning it will be a little bit easier to get your chosen safe house in tip-top shape. Lastly, some updates to the behavior of different explosives, specifically their damage and chance to cause fires. You can see the damage versus fire risk for these explosives presented on screen now, with the pipe bomb being the best for outright damage and flame bombs being the ideal choice for causing as much fiery chaos as possible. Okay, so that brings us lastly to the fixes in this update, and as always, a small disclaimer here that there is no hope in hell that I'm going to cover everything on this list, and that there's a link in the description to the full patch notes if you want to give this full list of fixes a read through. That said, I will summarize what I believe to be the most important bits. The agriculture system was formerly working incorrectly and not calculating the correct months, which was having an adverse effect on the farming of crops. This has now been fixed, so long as you take note of the best growing seasons, your cabbages should make it through till harvest. Some wonky and misaligned animations have been fixed with regards to eating and drinking, especially from saucepans or cooking pots, as well as some oversized items now being set to their appropriate size during consumption. Worry not, you can still eat a whole chicken with your bare hands and quite literally stuff it into your character's face while doing so. Prior to this update, some items could not be sharpened if their condition was lower than full. This wasn't intentional and has now been fixed, so you should be able to sharpen weapons at any point. A bug has been squashed that caused some animals to vanish from the player's inventory when killed. This was especially affecting players that were making use of the trapping skill, something that's proven very popular in build 42, so if that's you, then you should no longer have animals doing any disappearing acts after murdering them in cold blood. Tree stumps can now be removed from the ground using a pickaxe, something that had stopped functioning in the last version and has now been fixed. The walk to action on the right-click menu can now be used when dragging or carrying corpses. Previously, this wasn't functioning. If you're wondering why you'd need this feature, the walk to command automatically defines the best path for your character and will avoid obstacles like trees while doing so, making it easier to get through certain terrain and avoiding any careless scratches or damage to clothing. Lastly, several items that didn't have researchable recipes previously have been fixed in this update, such as katanas, scrap swords, and carpentry chisels, to name just a couple of them. So that's it for everything you need to know in this update, and as such, that's it from me in this video. One last time, there's a link in the description to the full patch notes if you want to give them a read, and as always, a very special thank you to my Patreon supporters for backing the channel for as little as £3 a month, joining our whitelisted multiplayer server, and getting involved with our monthly wipes and events. Link in the description if you'd like to join them. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one.